Every song we sing, the congregation songs, every one of them is too high for me. I just have a real struggle.
Well, if I go, I let it recommend. It's always almost always too high.
Yeah.
But then sometimes when I think, oh, lower the couple notches, it turns out bad.
Oh well. Make a joyful noise. Try to make it sound joyful. Anyway. Yeah. All right, let's go to Genesis again. We're gonna continue on this for another week or two anyway, and I want to do this while I study about the other, and I want to be ready. I want the other to be. When I start talking about the Word of God, I want it to be in order, and I want to have everything. I want to look at it good before we start, because it'll be more like this, teaching instead of preaching. I think, this morning was preaching. Tonight will be more teaching. All right, let's read in Genesis chapter 26. Let's read the first 5 verses there. It's about Isaac. Genesis 26, 1 through 5. Bible says, "And there was a famine in the land, beside the first famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went unto Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, unto Gerar. And the Lord appeared unto him, and said, Go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with thee, and will bless thee. For unto thee and unto thy seed I will give all these countries, and I will perform the oath which I swear unto Abraham thy father. And I will make thy seed to multiply as the stars of heaven, and will give unto thy seed all these countries. And in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed. Listen, because that Abraham obeyed my voice, and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." Now you see what Isaac inherited because of Abraham, his father. That ought to make you want to live for God and do right if you're a father, because that's the heritage you leave to your children. The very covenant of God. I mean, that's what he told Isaac here. He said, in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because that your father, Abraham, obeyed my voice. It'll make a difference to your children and to your generations. Yes, it will. And there'll be a lot of times when you'll wonder if it will or not. But I guarantee you, as sure as there's a God in heaven, it will. Now, Isaac, there's a lot of things I just want to glean out of this as we go through it tonight, and I'll try to hurry. Isaac had always been provided for very well. He didn't grow up a poor boy. He grew up, his father was rich, had plenty of things, but his father didn't build a big stone brick house for him to live in. They lived in a tent. They were rich, but they lived poor. By the world standards and by the way the world defines wealth and all of that. I mean, that's one of the first things, isn't it? Man, you got to have a castle to live in. If you're wealthy, you can't live in a little hut, let alone a tent. But Abraham was a sojourner where he was. He didn't belong there. He didn't intend to belong there. That's what God told him. He was a sojourner. He's a pilgrim. And if we have that kind of mindset about our walk with God and this life on earth, it would change up a lot of things for us. In Genesis 24 and verse 62, the Bible says, "And Isaac came from the way of the well Lahairoi, and for he dwelt in the south country." And then in Genesis 25:11, it says this. We're jumping ahead of where we were last week. Genesis 25:11, "And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well Lahairoi." That means well of the living one that seeth me. It means a fountain of water in the wilderness. So, famine was a new experience for Isaac. We read there in the beginning of our reading there, in verse 1 of chapter 26, that there was a famine in the land. It was a new experience for Isaac. We kind of lose track of how much time's passed here. His father had always been very rich before he was born, and then after he was born also. And he had heard of the famine that happened. How long do you think it's been since the famine happened where Abraham left and went down there to the same place and got in trouble and all of that? It's been almost 100 years. Think about that. It's been almost 100 years. And so Isaac had heard about that, but he'd never experienced anything like that himself. And it's obviously a trial of faith when, not just a random happening. We think of droughts and famines and all that. I don't know if we've ever seen a famine in our time, any of us here. We've seen, what do they call it? Not depression, but a recession. That's when money stops flowing and the interest rates get high and, jobs get a little more scarce and hard to come by, and that's what we count as a famine. But a famine back then was much worse than that. It meant you didn't have anything to eat. And that's what came hard to get. If any of you ever experienced that, really, I mean, seriously, where you absolutely didn't have nothing to eat and didn't know where you was going to get it. Have you ever known anybody like that? The only place I ever knew people like that was in Mexico. I mean, I knew people that didn't know, absolutely didn't know where they were going to get their next meal. They had no means, they had no money, they had no way except to beg, and they didn't know where they was going to get their next meal. When you really see a person in that kind of state, then it shocks you at how far removed we are from the way things really are. It's easy to testify to others of God's goodness when our brook is running full. I've thought about this a lot of times. Elijah went down to the brook. He had a nice place to stay, and the ravens brought him meat and bread, and, what a life. Didn't have to worry about all them people chasing him, But one day, guess what? The brook dried up. Did your brook ever dry up? Has that ever happened to you? I mean, everything was going real well for a good while, and then all of a sudden, now it ain't going well. I mean, the brook dried up. Yep, that's the experience that all of us have in life at one time or another. Well, he had to move on. Isaac had to do something because his herds and his servants and all that he had is in desperate straits for water and for food, because that's what a famine is. Not only you get hungry, but your animals do, and they depended on animals. Animals were their sustenance, and if they die, you die. I mean, they got to eat just like you got to eat. So God doesn't expect us to sit down and wait for the end. I don't think God expects us to do that, but he does expect us to trust him and obey him in the trials. There's a lot of difference between what Isaac did here and what Abraham did, and the way they handled it and everything. Isaac went down there. Isaac went down to Abimelech in Gerar, the land of the Philistines. And he went there not like Abraham did as a stranger, complete stranger. He had contacts down there. I mean, that's where he was born. That's where his father had been for years. And so it wasn't going into a complete void that he didn't know anything about. His father lived there a long time. He'd been born there. His father had made a covenant with Abimelech concerning wells and water. In Genesis chapter 21, verse 23, "Now therefore swear unto me here by God that thou wilt not deal falsely with me, nor with my son, nor with my son's son, but according to the kindness that I have done unto thee, thou shalt do unto me, and to the land wherein thou hast sojourned." Now that's Abimelech talking to Abraham, saying, "Now look, I want you to agree to me on this. You're going to treat us right. You're not going to turn against us. In verse 27 of that same chapter, Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and both of them made a covenant. And Abraham set 7 ewe lambs of the flock by themselves. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what mean these 7 ewe lambs which thou hast set by themselves? And he said, for these 7 ewe lambs shalt thou take of my hand, that they may be a witness unto me, that I have digged this well. Wherefore he called that place Beersheba, because there they swear both of them. So Abraham, Isaac's father, had made a covenant, an agreement with Abimelech. So he wasn't going into enemy territory. He was going down where people knew his dad, knew his family. Isaac went to a place that wasn't altogether unfamiliar to him. I mean, he knew people there. So we got to understand that. He knew the place, the places that he lived there with his father. You ever go back to some place where you lived as a kid? I've done that a few times. Go back there and try to figure everything out. It's changed so much, and we lived right here, but it looked like, they've moved that and changed this. And, sometimes it's hard to even tell where you were. But it's just kind of something in you wants to do that. Wants to look at those places where you grew up, where you were when you were younger. You have a lot of memories there. You have a lot of things that connections. So he had connections, so to speak, and he wasn't out of God's will in going there. He had God's blessing for being there. Where we read there in chapter 26, the Lord appeared to him and said, go not down into Egypt, dwell in the land which I shall tell thee of, sojourn in this land. So, God told him, stay right there. Don't go no farther. Don't go on down into Egypt. Right here. Stay right here. And so he did. But he's not a Philistine. And he's not to become one of them. That's the thing. It's a danger. It was a danger to them. It was the trial for him. Isaac maintained his identity and kept himself and his household separate from them while he's there. He didn't join them he didn't go to church with them. He didn't join them in their idolatrous worship. He didn't conform to them. He didn't try to compromise and agree with them in their philosophy and reasoning about life and the things of life. And, you understand? He didn't take up their ways of marrying off your kids and stuff like that. There's a big difference in the way God's people look at that matter and the way the world looks at that matter. Yeah. Well, I won't tarry there, but he doesn't try to compromise with them. But part of the trial of Isaac's faith in this famine and all this is to live among the Philistines. To live among them is a trial. Because it puts the pressure on you. And it shows in the end what you really are. That's just the way it is. It's not that, we worry about the influence of others, but if you've got the real deal in your heart, they're not going to be able to pull you away. That's the thing right there. We tried to do what I was preaching about this morning, keep them in the way. With no life in them. If you have the life with the way and the truth, you're going to stay in the way. I firmly believe that. Now, God blesses the lives of those who keep themselves unto Him and don't go after the ungodly world around them. In verses 12 and 14 here, it says, Then Isaac sowed that in that land. I'm in Genesis 26, 12 and 14. He sowed in that land and received in the same year 100-fold. That's a pretty good crop. It's a pretty good crop from back then. I had a neighbor one time, he planted 100 pounds of potatoes and he dug up 1,200 pounds when he dug his potatoes. That's 100-fold. Oh, yeah, no, that's 12-fold, I guess. So I thought, man, that's really good. He sowed and reaped 100-fold. Now, I don't know if he planted potatoes or not, but I mean, 100-fold. It's a good crop. And the Lord blessed him. Well, I reckon that beat the famine, didn't it? I mean, in the middle of a famine, you can do this. And the man waxed great and went forward and grew until he became very great. Now, it's talking about Isaac. For he had possessions of flocks and possession of herds and great store of servants, and the Philistines envied him. Of course. The world don't like to see a child of God prosper when they'll not conform to the ways of the world. If you'll do everything like they do, they're all for you. But if you go against them and you prosper, they ain't going to like it. And that's what happened here. They stopped these wells up. Oh, ain't that a dirty trick? Well, how low down and dirty and hateful can you be? Why would you do that in a famine? Why would you stop up the wells? They stopped the wells up. You know, that's an ignorant and hateful thing to do, especially when you're having a famine in the land. Now, Genesis 26:15-16, for all the wells which his father's servants had digged in the days of Abraham his fathers, the Philistines had stopped them and filled them with earth. And Abimelech said unto Isaac, Go from us, for thou art much mightier than we. All right. Now, there's more to the well than we think. Wells in the Bible represent some real, very important lessons for us. Let me say a few more things, and then I want to get into that. But the world at first, accepted him, now ask him to leave. Get away from us. Just go from us, for thou art much mightier than we. Won't you just go away and leave us alone? You remember when Jesus went across the sea and the maniac came out, and Jesus cast the legion of devils out of him, and he was healed. He was clothed and in his right mind and sitting at the feet of Jesus. And what did they say to Jesus? Depart from us. Go away. We don't want you here. They didn't like it. Don't you think it was a wonderful thing what he did? Isn't that wonderful? A man was delivered from screaming and cutting himself and crying in the tombs and naked, and no man could tame him or bind him. And Jesus freed him, made him whole again, in his right mind. And the people didn't like it. You see, what we count as blessings, most of the time the world just don't like it at all. Thou art much mightier than we. They feared that he and his ways were going to take over and they would be displaced. I've heard of churches, more than one that I know of, and that's what happened. They started growing, and the old people in the church said, these people are going to take over our church, and so they run them off. They didn't want new people coming into church because they'd take over the church. Same deal here. Just like this. Same spirit, same kind of thinking. There was no room for Jesus in the inn. And there's never room for the children of God in the world. The sooner you learn that, the better off you be. You realize if you are a child of God, there ain't no place out there for you. They'll welcome you at first, and then they'll do you just... The prodigal landed in the far country with his pockets full of money and had lots of friends. But it didn't take long till he was in the pig pen alone with nothing and nobody to help him. Isaac dug wells. Now, they stopped up the wells that Abraham's servants had dug. A well is something that people can draw on for generations. You dig a well, and it keeps sustaining, refreshing. It's a place of refreshment. It's a place of water, life is water. It takes water for life, so it's life-giving. Verses 17 and 18. And Isaac departed thence and pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there. And Isaac digged again the wells of water which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father. He dug the same wells. That's important too. He didn't dig new wells. He didn't dig contemporary wells. He didn't dig wells that were a different version of his father's. He dug the same old wells. Dug the same holes out. Where they had found it before, that's where he dug to find it again. Very important. That's a truth that is steadfast and sure. For the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham, and he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. See there? He named the wells the same names they had that his father had given them. He didn't give them new names. He didn't give them a new suit, a new way, a new image. You know, they didn't change things. He didn't change it. Have churches changed? No. I've lived long enough to see that churches have changed. What in the world is all the rock music and the worldly music, and what is all the lights out and the smoke? And I thought, the house of God darkened? What in the world? Well, that's the way the Philistines like it. So we got to do it that way. We don't want to make them not feel at home here. So it's not that way. You read your Bible and you read the truths that are there. Abraham dug wells, life-giving wells, wells that sustain people, wells that fed the animals, wells that took care of things. It's a need of life, a place to draw from. And the Philistines stopped them up, shut the doors, boarded the windows, closed them down. And Isaac came along and he opened them back up again. And he called them by the same names. I think a church ought to be called a church. I just don't see why or how that a church can be called some other thing that don't include church at all. If it's a church, that's what Jesus called it. That's what the Bible says he died for. That's what the church says that he bought with his precious blood, was the church. So I ain't ashamed to put church on the side and call it a church. Wells are a source of water, which is the most basic and pressing thing needed to sustain life. Y'all know that. You got to have water. Water's needed a lot more often than food is. We can live for weeks without food, but only days without water. We went on that hike in Mexico that time up in the mountains, and I remember how it was so hot, and it was in the jungle, and we had no water. I took a gallon of water, and we drank it just in 30 minutes. We was out of water. Had 4.5 hours to go, and, there was a creek. We were following a creek up through the mountains. But every once in a while, there'd be a bunch of pigs in the creek, or a horse or some cattle in the creek. And, if you take some water out in your hand, you can see stuff floating all in it. We can't drink out of that creek. You know how long it took us to drink out of that creek? About 2 hours. We just filling the jug up over and over right out of the creek. We got up on top, and they said, when we get up here, there's a house, and they got a well, and they got good cold water, and we'll get us a good drink there, and we can fill everything up. Well, we got up there, and that good, cool water, when they handed me a glass, it was clear, and I looked at it, and it was just full of wiggle tails, You know what you do when you're thirsty? You just drink and try not to swallow them. You say, oh, no. Oh, yes, you will. We took a bunch of girls up to the shut-ins years ago for a camp, and so when we got up there, we gave each one of them a fork. And that's your fork for all week. And they said, well, what are we going to drink? And we said, right there's the creek. And they said, we ain't drinking that nasty water. And, well, you know how long it took them to start drinking that water? It just a couple hours. They was down there drinking that water. We give them one fork. They didn't, and I said, you got to take care of it. It's your fork. Well, you know, they lost the first day or two. They lost their fork, and they couldn't find it, and you know, and they didn't want nobody else to eat. But by the end of the week, anywhere they could find a fork, it didn't matter who'd had it, where it had been. That's the way it is. Water's needed. You need water. It's a source of refreshment. A well provides security for our life. What's the first thing you got to do when you build a house? When you get ready to build a house where you're going to live, it's just one of the very first things. The electric company won't put power to your house until you have a well. You got to have a water supply of some kind. You got to drill a well. It provides the means of keeping ourselves clean. That's kind of important. And such as washing our clothes, the dishes, bathing our bodies. We got to have water. We got to have water. So wells are very important. John 4, verse 6. They're a type of spiritual nourishment. These wells are that we're talking about here. This is the lesson we want to get from this. Spiritual nourishment, spiritual sustenance, and spiritual security for life, for living. They're an heritage to leave to the generation that follow. Do you understand what I'm talking about? This matter of wells, they're a type. If we're going to leave anything to the generation after us, we better dig some wells. We better establish them, and we better have them identified where they can find them. And we better keep the Philistines from filling them up. We better make sure that our children and our grandchildren have some place where they can get a drink of water. Some place where they can go and find what they need to keep themselves clean in this filthy world. In John chapter 4, verse 6, now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well. And it was about the 6th hour. Now, here's Jesus sitting on Jacob's well. Man, we're talking about a long time. We're talking about a lot of generations have passed. And Jacob's well is still there. And Jesus comes to the well. And he didn't come to get a drink. He came to give a woman a drink. And he used that well to lead that woman to himself, to make her understand about her soul and her lost condition. And how many have since read that story? How many sermons have been preached on that story? How many people have been saved through all these thousands of years? And it had to do with that well that Jacob dug and left for the generations that followed. The ungodly will accept you with open arms when you come looking for one of their wells to drink from. But when the godly start digging wells in their territory, they'll run them off. From the presence of the Philistines and the prosperity he was experiencing, he went to the valley of Gerar. That's the lowest part of the country of the Philistines, low. Now that's the best place to dig wells, You're going to find water quicker there. Now, if you go down south of here, you'll find water pretty quick, but it ain't fit to drink. But the high places are not usually the best places to dig wells. Now, we live up in the hills, and, I've seen some pretty fantastic things. We live up on top of a pretty good-sized hill. And I think, how deep's the well, Dad? 265 feet? something like that. Anyway, my brother drilled a well down the road from us, and he was up on the side of a hill a little bit, but not near as much as us. He went down 150 feet and got water, good water. Where the low people live, not where the high-stepping people live. That's the place you dig wells. Well, I'm not saying what I want to say through this to make the lesson clear, but you're not going to go out there in the middle of the world, the worldly people, the worldly places, in their domain, where they rule, where they live, where they do their things, and dig wells there. It ain't going to happen. If you dig a well, it ain't going to be fit to drink out of. Well, maybe you don't understand what I'm saying. What are the wells of the Philistines like? Well, they got university on them, and colleges, and what are they filled with now? What are they teaching? What's their philosophy? What do they think of God? How much truth do they really teach? Now, if you're going to go learn to be a welder or something like that, that's a different story. But if you're going to go there and just learn about, arts, liberal arts, what are you going to learn? Well, in our time, you're going to learn about gender confusion and LBGTK, whatever, the alphabet people, you're going to learn about that. But you ain't going to learn anything of God, except that he's a myth. And the people who believe in him are fools. You want your kids drinking out of a well like that? I've known some wells where people used to drink out of it, and you look down in there and you don't want to drink out of that thing. They've been throwing stuff in there, and it's a nasty mess. Ain't fit to use anymore. That's what the world's got. Now, he called them, Isaac digged again the wells which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father. And he called them by the name, same names his father did. He didn't modernize them or call them something that was easier for the Philistines to accept. The best way to find the truth is to look in the same places where it has been found in the past. When are we ever going to learn that? Are we ever going to learn that? Especially when the truth is scarce and times are desperate. Jeremiah 6 and verse 16, Thus saith the Lord, stand ye in the ways and see, and ask for the old paths where is the good way, and walk therein, and ye shall find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk therein. We're not going back to that old-fashioned stuff. We like it just like it is. We're not going to... but they'd lost their way. You want to find the truth? Back up. If you get lost somewhere, what do? Well, you go back to the last place where you knew where you were at. Last place where you had your bearings. You don't just keep it going when you don't even know where you're at. Or when you know you're in the wrong place, go back to where it was right, where things were good. What a generation we're living in that thinks that all of the previous generations were the dumbest people that ever lived on the earth. You can't change your own oil. You don't know what to do when anything happens in your life. You don't know how to handle any problems. This generation, I'm talking to generally everybody now, they don't know how to do nothing, anything. And yet they think all the people in the past, all of our ancestors were fools, and they knew how to do things. They built the roads you're running on. They built the houses that you look at, except for these cracker boxes that have been built in the last few decades. Back up a while. a little farther than that and see what they built. Compare that to these modern box houses, box stores, and box everything. Men used to build something. When they built things, they did something. They put some beauty in it, and they put some design and creativity in it. They didn't just make a box to live in. But we're okay with the box. Oh well, I just chased a rabbit there. The old wells are still there. They've just been filled in with dirt and junk by the Philistines of the world. Isaac just dug them out again. Philistines, who represent the ungodly, they don't dig wells. They just steal them from people that do. Yeah. How many of you have ever heard of Harvard University? Yeah. Well, how many of you know who started it and why? Harvard University was started by Puritan Christians for the training of preachers to preach the gospel. So was Princeton University. Just about all of them, of the old universities, were started by Christian people to train men for the ministry. What are they now? The churches, I read all the time. I get these emails from people that tell and all this stuff, and these churches, they tell about a church where they used to have all these people coming and the preaching was sound and it was a place where God really worked. And now there's lesbians and pastoring it, and they're doing other things with the property, and it's just the same place where there used to be a well. It's all filled up with junk. Can't go there anymore and get anything. It's been stopped up. Genesis 26, 19 through 21. Isaac's servants digged in the valley and found there a well of springing water. And the herdmen of Gerar did strive with Isaac's herdmen, saying, "The water is ours." And he called the name of the well Esek, because they strove with him. And they digged another well and strove for that also. And he called the name of it Sitnah. So then they run the people off who dug the well. See what that verse told us about there? Then they ruined the well by filling it with junk and making it useless to everyone. So this is what's happened to all the colleges and Bible schools in America and in England. I was reading the other day about Spurgeon's church and the college that he started to train preachers, and what it had turned in. I don't think it even exists now. I mean, it's for something else now. But the college I'm talking about. But it was really, for some time, it was a well. And then it turned into nothing. Now, the only way to have a well, they'll never leave them alone or avail themselves of the goodness they provide. The only way to have a well that'll endure is to dig it outside of the Philistines' domain. If you read in the Bible, back in the Old Testament, I'm afraid I got something going on here. But anyway, you'll read where Elisha, there was like a school of the prophets. And it was way out in the middle of nowhere. They didn't have it in a town somewhere. They lived out and had a place where he trained those men. And it wasn't in the big city. It's Genesis 26, 22 through 23. And he removed them thence and digged another well, and for that they strove not. And he called the name of it Rehoboth. And he said, "For now the Lord hath made room for us, and we shall be fruitful in the land." And he went up from thence to Beersheba. So, real quick, you got to come out from among them and be separate before you can really have any positive influence on the Philistines and leave anything of lasting value and use it to your posterity. Isaac had to keep distancing himself from the Philistines, the world. He finally had to go back to his place, to the place where Abraham had been at Beersheba. Yeah, my nose is bleeding. As soon as Isaac separates himself from the world, like he should have been all along, God appears to him again.